What's up, everybody? It is Izzy back again today with another Q&A. But before we get to the first question of the day, if you want to see how my day started with a sick roast, go ahead and give this picture a read. First question. Do you think your buy-in from JP's advice influenced the improvements that you're seeing? I mean, what buy-in? I feel like some of you guys just want me to say, like, JP completely single-handedly changed my mind about everything. But the reality is, like, I lowered my volume to about 1 set per exercise in October. And for about 3 years prior to that, I was doing the volumes that I'm, again, doing now. So it's not like I needed JP to say, hey, maybe you should consider more volume. I already have 3 years of training history to show me that I can benefit from that. I think the main thing that really swayed me is these pictures right here. This is from today. This is back in June. In June at 229 pounds, today at 234 pounds. I just don't feel like I made enough progress this year. And I mean, of course, everybody feels that way. But considering that I'm relatively new to PEDs, I just expected to get more than like 5 to 7 pounds of new tissue from a 60-pound push. But that looks like about what I got, and it's just not good enough. Can you give advice for building up enough mobility to back squat without elbow pain? So, I mean, there's really only so much you can do. Like, if you're already working on your external rotation, the biggest thing you have to realize is that any sort of barbell back squat is going to beat up your elbows and shoulders to some degree, even if you have very good flexibility. I mean, there was times where I was like 150 pounds with like very, very flexible shoulders, and if I low bar squatted enough times per week, it hurt. So there's a couple things you can do from a technique standpoint. You can widen your grip. You can take some of your fingers off the bar. You can bend your wrists and use wrist wraps to have the wrist wraps absorb some of that downward force from the bar and lessen the mobility requirements because your wrist is bent. And then from there, you just got to make sure that you're not trying to do this too frequently. Keep working on your external rotation and use frequencies, intensities, and volumes that are manageable from a tendonitis perspective. And if you just can't get it to work, invest in a safety bar. How long are you resting between sets? I literally have no idea. I don't look at a clock. I don't look at a timer. I auto-regulate my rest. Virtually every single elite lifter in any lifting sport that I know, whether that's powerlifting or bodybuilding or strongman, does not actually time their rest periods with a stopwatch. They auto-regulate it and they go when they're ready. Now, they might have heuristics and little rules about what it means to be ready, but usually what I do is I'll watch the last set, edit the video, write down in my log what I did, get a drink of water, take a piss if I need to, change the weight, and then I just go. I don't really dilly-dally a lot because otherwise the workouts take like 3 hours. Are seed oils bad for you, or does it not matter? Honestly, this is the kind of thing that you really should not even be worrying about unless you are a high-level competitor or you aspire to be a high-level competitor. It's just so unimportant in the grand scheme of things. Personally, I don't even cook with oils ever, not any kind whatsoever. I keep my fat extremely low because of my peptide use, and it provides better body composition results. I don't think cooking with oil, if you with any oil, really, if you are trying to aspire to be a high-level physique athlete, is going to be your best bet. You can get your fat from other sources that have better micronutrient profiles. When RDLing, are you retracting your scapulas and lats, or are you just letting it hang? I don't really know why people even talk about this stuff, to be honest with you. I just think they're just full of shit. They don't know what they're talking about. So, for example, if you're doing an RDL with any sort of appreciable weight on the bar, you are automatically going to keep the bar in the middle of your foot because the midfoot is the balance point. So if the weight is like significantly greater than body weight, which for any strong lifter it is, or at least it's close enough, if it goes forward of the middle of your foot, you're going to lose your balance. So even if you create space between the bar and your shins by pushing your hips back, you're still going to have to keep it over the middle of the foot, and your lats do that. And as far as your scapulas, I don't know anybody who has scapulas that are strong enough to keep them retracted when doing RDLs with 200, 300, 400, 500 pounds. It's not a scapular retraction exercise. They're just going to do what they do. Don't worry about your scap position in deadlifts. If I eat 200 grams of protein a day, 4 times a day, 50 grams per meal, what are the chances that my body only uses half of that protein for muscle protein synthesis, thus making it the same as if I only ate 100 grams of protein? Zero whatsoever, 0% chance. I don't think you really fully understand muscle protein synthesis and muscle protein metabolism anyway, because you have to think about it like this. If you were to gain 10 pounds of muscle in a year, right, that is 4.5 kilos, so 4,500 grams. Now, what is like 4,500 grams divided by 360 days? And it's probably like 12 or 13 grams a day. I don't have a calculator on me. So what we're talking about, in order to gain 10 pounds of muscle in a year, you need to metabolize 12 to 13 grams of protein, new protein a day. So the vast majority of protein you eat, no matter what, no matter how you divide it, no matter how much per meal, does not even go towards muscle protein synthesis in terms of making new muscle. I trained quads on Monday. Today is Thursday. They're still sore, but it's scheduled leg day. Should I train, or should I be a huge biznitch and not train? Honestly, I don't put that much stock into soreness in general. As long as you're able to improve your performance, that matters a lot more than soreness. That said, this is your 4th week, according to the question, of you doing this. So by now you should know whether or not that residual soreness is actually affecting performance. And I mean, I personally would never skip a training session just because of being sore. I'd want to actually go in and try and see that performance was inadequate before pulling the plug. In the future, lower your volume so that you're not sore when you have your next quad day every single time. Do powerlifters not care about getting big? What's the point if you're not gaining muscle? So they actually do care about getting big to some extent, because in the long run, there's only a few ways to get stronger, right? Like, you can improve your technique, you can improve neurological efficiency, but those things have limited amount of improvements that you can make. So in order to build a higher base over time, the only way to get stronger in the long term, because you can't make infinite technique improvements, is to build bigger muscles. It's just that in the sport of powerlifting, building bigger muscles is a byproduct of the training and not the explicit goal of the training. And other than that, I mean, people just enjoy different things. Like, it's exhilarating to lift a weight that you've never lifted before, and it can be really cool to go after state records, national records, all of these things. People have different personalities, and they find different things motivating. I've always enjoyed lifting heavy, and I really still do. Well, we finally got her back home, so all is well. Thank you for everyone who offered speedy recovery, wishes, all that stuff. I could have picked from any of like 40 different messages like this. So I just picked this one. But again, thank you to everybody who said something. I did show her all of those, and it lifted her spirits a little bit. So thanks again, everyone. Definitely appreciate that. No more trips to the hospital, and no more weird hospital library voice. Hopefully. Back to normal. Hopefully. Do you think rucking is a good form of cardio for those who enjoy lifting? I think rucking can be a great way to get some general physical preparation, to enjoy yourself, go see nature. But when we're talking about cardio for lifting, a machine is going to be better because you can program it. You can set a specific time. You can say 25 minutes. If you go rucking like you're going up a mountain or whatever, it's a fixed distance, and then you have to come back. You can't stop at a certain point and like get a helicopter back to your car. You can't make fine adjustments to the speed to keep your heart rate in a certain range. So it's to me, it's just less adjustable, less controllable than hopping on an actual cardio machine. And so I would recommend an actual cardio machine for most purposes if we're talking about lifting programming. That doesn't mean you can't ruck, and I'm not telling you not to ruck. Anyway, I did not have that many questions initially today, and all of a sudden there's like a flood of them, so I'm going to start posting some of my back off sets. That's why everything's out of order here. What are the different macronutrition strategies for people who use anabolic androgenic steroids and peptides? How is it different than what it is for naturals? So I don't think it is. I think that everybody benefits from having a relatively low fat intake and a high carb intake. Here's the thing. When you are enhanced and you're using human growth hormone, that is going to greatly increase your fasted blood glucose levels. And when you use steroids, that's going to greatly increase your body weight and thus greatly increase the amount of food you need to eat to gain weight. And when you combine the two things, you can reach the limits of your personal pancreatic system. And because of that, insulin then has to be brought into the picture to keep your fasted blood glucose at an optimal level. And when insulin is brought into the picture, guess what? Dietary fat is stored as fat. things like carbohydrates and protein can potentially be used for something else. The same is true for naturally produced insulin as well. So I recommend low fat, high carb for everybody. What do your daily macros look like? I honestly don't know. I don't track macros. I eat on a meal plan, and then if I ever want to go off plan, I just try to make roughly calorie equivalent substitutions. But I honestly don't eat off plan that often. So if I had to guess, my macros are probably something like 30 grams of fat currently, 250 to 300 grams of protein, and 500 to 600 carbs. And keep in mind, that's a relatively steep deficit for me. I'm losing something like 3 pounds a week on that. I don't necessarily recommend that everybody have their fat that low, but you really only need to get in the essential fatty acids. And if you're smart with your choices, I use nuts and seeds and salmon as my fat sources. That keeps my fat number a lot lower than if I ate a lot of fatty beef and eggs. If you're natural, don't worry about it as much, but it is important for people on peptides. How to determine whether adding a new movement is worth the CNS fatigue. I wouldn't really be thinking about CNS fatigue too much, but in terms of how to determine whether or not adding a new movement is worth it, you need to have some type of criteria for adding volume. And yes, the absolute best metric is going to be progression, rate of progression specifically. If you're at the point where you are struggling to make any kind of progress, or perhaps you're barely eking out 1% microload improvements, that's a situation where you might want to consider adding volume. In the Renaissance periodization paradigm, there's other things that you could look for: stimulus proxies, things like pump, disruption, soreness. I'm not as keen on these ones, but they can definitely also be useful indicators or tools that you can have in your toolbox. But at the end of the day, you need to have a reason for thinking that you could benefit from more volume. And the number one thing there is going to be, in my opinion, performance. Does training vacuums help you to do anything other than get good at doing vacuums? Yes, actually, it trains the TVA muscle, the transverse abdominis, which is almost like a belt for your entire core, like a waist trainer for your entire core. From a performance perspective, it may not be super valuable, but from a bodybuilding perspective, as far as waist control and presentation, there are countless anecdotes of people who have found that doing vacuums has helped a great deal in keeping the waist under control. So yes, in short, yes. If I keep adding sets, will my biceps eventually get sore? I'm doing about 10 sets per session right now. Well, why are you chasing soreness in the first place? I honestly don't get like traditionally sore from anything that I do ever pretty much. My lower back gets like traditionally sore after deadlifts, and that's it. Everything else, if I want to feel soreness, I would have to have somebody like go pressing on the muscle or massage it. There's other things that you can look for, like disruption, which is sort of when you can tell the area has been challenged and messed with. If you go to lift a gallon of milk and it's harder than usual. There's things like, did you get a good pump? And most important of all, what is your performance like doing 10 sets of biceps in a single session? Typically, I would say if you're up to doing 10 sets of something in a session, you're better off starting to split that and increasing your frequency. Now, everyone has different volume tolerances, but maybe you're not that close to failure if 10 sets a session isn't doing anything. Chest supported rows. The lengthened is easy, but the short is hard. Should I do reps with body English? How do I know when to stop the set? So the first thing that you have to keep in mind is that you don't have to get the whole range of motion with just one movement. The muscles that help the most at the beginning of a row are trained maximally in most types of pull downs and pullovers. Secondly, are you somebody with very low volume needs, or do you have super limited equipment? Because there should be a reason why you're trying to get so much out of one movement when you could, for example, do 2 or 3 hard sets, exhaust the short with this chest supported row, then go move on to a different row machine or a different row that is more mid-range or lengthened biased, and train the rest of the range of motion with a different movement. You don't have to get everything with one movement. A lot of people seem to be able to improve their SFR with a few cheat reps on rows. I'm sometimes a fan of it, but a lot of other people simply just start flailing around when they do that. See it and try it for yourself. Yeah, so funny thing about that, like I was talking to one of the nurses and he was like, well, what do you do for a living? And I always people when they ask me that, because I just say personal trainer, because this is like much easier than trying to be like, I do internet marketing and real estate and this other shit. And so I just tell people I'm a personal trainer. And then they usually take one look at me and they go, oh, that makes sense. And that's exactly what happened here. And he goes, here, I bet you'd like this. And he like leaves and comes back with this lung capacity thing. And he's like, how tall are you? I'm like, 5'7". He goes, well, you should probably be able to get about 3,000. And the thing goes up to like 4,000. So at that point, like, challenge accepted, buddy. I'm gonna try to beat this little 3,000 mark. And then I like the first time I tried it, I actually didn't even get 3,000. I got like 2,500. But then by like the third or fourth time, I got the hang of it and I was able to get the thing fully maxed out. Really just goes to show that strength training does increase your cardio and lung capacity. Standing overhead press, but not seated. Honestly, man, I haven't trained the standing overhead press in like 2 years. But, I mean, just think about this logically. The stabilizing muscles are going to have to work harder in any sort of standing press variant versus a seated one. The traps are going to have to do more work to stabilize the weight overhead because you don't have back support to lean against to help you with that process. So it stands to reason that if you haven't done a standing overhead press in a while, and you go ahead and you go do a standing overhead press, it could work some of those stabilizing muscles in a way that is hard for them and that they're not used to. That novel stimulus can lead to soreness. A lot of times when we think about stabilizing muscles, I shouldn't say we, but some people think of like some tiny little muscle that doesn't have a name, when in reality, oftentimes the stabilizing muscles like the biceps, the upper traps, the lower traps, they're big muscles that are doing stabilization. How did you meet your partner? She hates when I answer this question, and I don't have enough time. But the first time we met, she was on a really bad date with some loser at a bar. So I rescued her from that, and then over the years, we ran into each other many times in various nightlife locations in Seattle. Then she went off in the Peace Corps and went to Africa. Eventually, she came back from Africa, and we visited with each other in Seattle again. And then next thing you know, we were living together in Colombia for a short while. And then we broke up, and then here we are back again together in Boston.
So rude.
But anyway, long story short, I finally got my head out of my ass and stopped being selfish, and I'm blessed to have her in my life. She's awesome. I love her. Alright everybody, thanks for watching the video. As always, if you like the video, hit the like button. If you have any comments or questions, leave them in the comment section below. I answer all of them generally. Subscribe if you haven't already, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.